And we are live. We are live. Lesléa Newman, we are
Hmm.
live. We are live. It's so wonderful to have you on the program. I can't say how honored I am. Well, I just said it. I'm very honored. How are you doing? Mashlomech.
Beseda, call Beseda.
I'm here in Israel and you're somewhere in Massachusetts.
Correct.
And we're having an interview. And I should say that you are, wow, such a celebrated author, poet, children's book writer, novelist, award winning. My goodness, plays have been made of your writing. I'm overwhelmed. And I'm so overwhelmed that before we start, I should remember to say what the program is. So I'm Mel Rosenberg, and I am the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. And I am here with multi award-winning published author Lesléa Newman. Lesléa, wonderful to have you.
I'm so happy to be here.
You're happy to be there.
Here, there, everywhere.
Okay, we'll sing that later. And we are here to celebrate two books that came out within a month of each other. What's going on?
Well, I didn't plan it that way, but there's so many factors in terms of, placing the book with the publisher, finding an illustrator, the illustrator doing their work. So these two books just kind of came together at the same time.
Okay, so let's first of all, like father, like son. I see it behind you. Let's wave it around and brag about it.
Here it is.
Oh, okay. So a few words about this book, which launched from Abrams, I think, just last
Yes.
month.
So it's a book about the relationship between fathers and sons, and specifically how fathers can be gentle and tender with their sons, which I think is something that we need to talk about.
Okay, absolutely. A few words about the illustrator who goes by initials, the editor, anything you want to show a double spread, go ahead.
So, A.G. Ford is also a multi-award winning fantastic illustrator. And what my editor told me was that he presented some books to AG and said, pick the one you'd like to illustrate. And he chose my book. So I was thrilled about that. So here, for example, is a beautiful illustration of a father and son growing flowers. I particularly like that. I really like all the illustrations, really. Um, and this one is really lovely too. A father and son running on the beach and enjoying the beautiful day. So there are just lots of wonderful illustrations in here.
Go ahead and read a little bit. It's so poetic, so
I'm
lyrical.
yeah, well, so the text is a poem and it's very short. And I feel like this writing this book really helped me because I'm always learn how to keep the text at a minimum. And being a poet, that really helps. So can we do it this way?
Sure.
My daddy knits, my daddy sews, he makes us both fantastic clothes. My daddy cooks, my daddy bakes, he serves me the most yummy cakes. My daddy strums his old guitar. We sing of places near and far. Now, this particular spread, the book is dedicated to my brother and my nephew, my brother's son, and my brother is a guitarist, bass guitarist, so he loved this spread.
And
So,
and
that,
and the daddies morph through the story, or am I missing something?
so there are different dads throughout the whole story, and then they all come together. I'll read the last two spreads. My daddy teaches me each day to be strong in a gentle way. And every single day, I'm glad that I'm his son and he's my dad. And so all the dads that have and sons that have previously been featured in the book all come together in this final spread, which I just love.
Yeah, me too. So Leslie, whose idea was that to have multiple dads in the story? It's always
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so I provide the text. and I leave it to my editor, illustrator, and art director to come up with the visual storytelling. And so, I was really of two minds when I originally wrote the book. I thought of it as one dad, but then when my editor suggested that we have this whole group of dads, I thought that was great, more inclusive and more appealing, really.
Let's name the editor.
My editor is the brilliant Howard Reeves of Abrams Books. I've worked with him before on many other projects, including Always Matt, a tribute to Matthew Shepard. That's a book I did with Howard. And The Fairest in the Land is another book that I've done with Howard. And I just love working with him.
And that is your 85th picture, children's book.
Yes, this came out in April, and then Joyful Song came out in May.
And it was joined within weeks by,
Yeah.
I think the book, this is the book we're going to concentrate on, is The Joyful
Okay.
Song. So a few words about that, the illustrator, Levine Carrido.
So,
Publishing.
Joyful Song, A Naming Story, is a book about a little boy named Zachary. He's the narrator, and he has two moms, and he has a brand new baby sister. And the first Shabbat of her life, they walked to the synagogue for her naming ceremony. So I'm sure I don't remember my own naming ceremony, but I really have this very strong visual picture of my dad holding me up on the bima. My mother was not allowed to step up on the bima. At that time, women were not allowed. I was raised in a conservative synagogue. So it's a healing in a way to have a two-mom family up on the bima with their son and their new baby girl. And the book was inspired because I was sitting in my own synagogue in Northampton, Massachusetts, where I'm now a member. And there was a blessing and naming ceremony for a little girl named Ruby, and her two moms got up on the bima, which I didn't know that was going to happen on that particular Shabbat. And it just brought tears to my eyes. It was so joyful.
So it's a wonderful book. It show us the illustrations, talk about Susan Gall.
Oh, so Susan Gall is an amazing illustrator. This is my third book with her. She also did my book, Welcoming Elijah, A Passover Tale with a Tale for Charles Bridge. And she also did Here's the World, A Year of Jewish Holidays, which was also an Abrams book with my editor, Howard Reeves. So what she had said to me was she was thinking of the rainbow. And she thought the rainbow at this point, maybe it's a little trite or cliche. So what she did was she took all the colors of the rainbow and infused the book with just this incredibly bright palette. And it's just everybody that I showed the book to comments on the illustrations and how gorgeous they are.
And can you show us the spread with the synagogue, which is like mind-blowing? This book is fantastic.
It's so beautiful. So here we have the family is filing in to the synagogue. And then we have the family up on the bima with the rabbi. And then I'll show you my favorite spread.
We're getting to mine also.
Yes, is it this one?
Absolutely.
Isn't it gorgeous? So you just see Zachary and his little sister, whose name I'm not going to say because you have to get to the end of the book to find out her name. But they're just looking at each other with such love. The way Susan captured that, it just makes my heart sing with joy. Joyful Song. There you go.
And well, should we give away that the name of the book is connected to somehow to her name?
Well, we can just say that. And I bet maybe some people can figure it out. But I just the other day got an email from a woman in a two-mom family with the same name as the baby in the book, and she was beyond thrilled. She just felt like I wrote this book exactly for her.
So, Lesléa, you it seems to me that you have been bucking convention since your own naming ceremony.
Possibly.
Yeah, like father, like son. People are going to say, oh, but it's not own voices. But you don't care. I don't care. Why should anybody care?
Well, I feel like, especially that particular book, the way that book came about was I was reading my book, Sparkle Boy, at the Eric Carr Museum of Picture Book Arts. I was doing a program actually on smashing gender stereotypes in children's literature, which is something that I offer. And so after the presentation, during the Q&A, either a teacher or a librarian, and I so wish I could find her to thank her for planting this idea in my head. She said, this is wonderful. Sparkle Boy likes to wear sparkly skirts like his sister, etc. And she said, I would also like to see a book just about fathers being gentle with their sons. And, I kind of get excited and dread a suggestion like that at the same time, because it's like, oh my God, now I have to do it. And what if I can't? What if I'm not, not smart enough, not talented enough, not skilled enough?
You're saying that after more than 80 books and so many
Oh my
awards?
God, of course. Oh yes,
You you have imposter syndrome?
I'm a I'm a mountain of doubt.
Oy, oy,
Absolutely.
oy, oy vey.
Oy vey.
So
Well,
yeah,
every well, you go ahead.
yeah. I want to take you back to baby Lesléa. I want to segue from the from this to little you. And what were you like as a small child? You wrote from the age of 6.
So, what was I like? I was very giggly. Um, I was also very serious, like I had this little notebook and I would write my little poems, and I took it very, very seriously. And I would go to the library and I would see books with authors' photos on the back and thought about what it would be like to have my photo on a book. And then as I got older, actually as a teen, I would go to the poetry section and picture myself with my little book between Pablo Neruda and Frank O'Hara. That was kind of where I saw myself. So I loved the ocean. I grew up in Brighton Beach, and I loved the water. And I would go swimming with my dad. I would, kind of have my hands around his neck and be, sprawled on his back, and we would swim. I liked ice cream. I liked walking down the boardwalk, listening to the music. So, I had a happy childhood. Then I had kind of a schism because we moved to Long Island, which made me very unhappy because I really liked being a city kid, and suburbia was a difficult adjustment. We left my grandmother behind in Brooklyn, though we saw her quite often, but it wasn't the same. So that really changed things. And actually, that's when I mostly turned to writing, to comfort my sorrow of leaving my beloved. My grandmother was across the street. I could go to her house, whenever I wanted, and now she was a 40-minute drive away, and that was a big change.
But you wrote a lot of poetry regarding your parents. The
Not when I was growing up, but later as a young adult, I did. When I was a kid, I wrote mostly sad little poems. Like I remember this one poem I wrote about a dog being run over, which is horrible, right? But when I look back, I think I needed to express my sorrow, and that was the way that I did it. And then
the
my parents
sorrow
bought me a dog.
the sorrow of leaving Brooklyn for Long Island.
Yeah.
And how did you break in as an author? So you had aspirations. Many young people have aspirations. How did you turn into this international star? What were the moments?
So my first publication was a couple of poems in 17 magazine, written when I was a teenager. So um, I read 17 magazine and I noticed they had poetry. So I thought, well, why not send them my poetry? And it was really a wonderful experience because I was invited to come up to the office of 17 magazine. And I remember I wore a black leotard and a wraparound flowered skirt that actually I heard used to be a curtain. It was like my Scarlett O'Hara moment. I got it at a used clothing store, and little black cloth Mary Janes. And I went up to, I don't remember where it was, but somewhere in Midtown, and it was at a very high level. And my editor was Hilary Cosell. Now, if that's a familiar name, she's the daughter of Howard Cosell, the sportscaster. And so she took me into her office, and she had a brown paper bag, and she dumped it out on her desk, and papers went flying all over. And she said, "This is what I receive every day, and your poems stuck out like diamonds." I'll never forget that. She was so kind to me. And she published me, I think, 3 times, and then I aged out because the poems had to be written when you were a teenager. So then I moved on. And then, so that was one key moment. But then the other key moment was I decided, when I was a teenager, the poets I was reading, well, of course, Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, because every teenage girl at that time was reading these poems in the late 60s, early 70s. And I also fell in love with the Beats. And I heard that Allen Ginsberg was actually teaching in Colorado at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, which is part of Naropa. At that point, it was Naropa Institute. Now it's Naropa University. So I decided to have my own on-the-road adventure, and I hitchhiked out to Colorado, and I studied with Allen for 2 years. And that is when my first little chapbook of poetry called Just Looking for My Shoes was published. And then after that, I just kept writing and looking for publishing opportunities, which is what I still do.
Okay. And at what stage did you write the poetry books for your mom and your father?
So I have 2 books. One is called I Carry My Mother, and I wrote that. I started it actually when my mom was still alive, just a little bits of it. I moved home for a while to help my dad take care of my mom. And so every night after I tucked her into her hospital bed, I went upstairs to my childhood bedroom, and I wrote a form called the Triolet. And I have to say that I was inspired by my friend, the wonderful Jane Yolen, who, when her husband David Stemple was dying, she took care of him, and every night she went and wrote a sonnet. And I just thought, I can't handle a sonnet, but I wrote a triolet. So that was, my mom died in 2012. And then I think the book came out in 2015. And then my dad died in 2017. And then I wrote a book for him called I Wish My Father. And so my parents are now a matching set, which I'm sure they would love. And that book came out in 2021, I believe.
Okay, so before we go back to your young adulthood, could you read us a poem from
Yeah.
from one of those
So so this is my book, I Carry My Mother. And what I'm going to read is Sitting Shiva, which is a series of haiku. Mirrors are covered, wooden benches are set out. Have a good morning. Where's the coffee pot? I ask my father, who knows. My mother would know. Welcome, please come in, sit anywhere, except there. That's my mother's chair. Ancient Hebrew prayers cannot bring my mother back, so what good are they? My aunt spills her tea when I speak to her softly, in my mother's voice. White coffee cup smeared with my mother's red lipstick, don't you dare wash it. Chocolate rugelach my mother and I both love, clog my throat like mud. My mother's old friend cups my face with wilted hands, fingers wet with tears. My aunt stands to leave. Call me if you need anything. I need my mother.
Read another one.
Read another one. That's very kind of you.
I'm so moved.
Actually, I think what I'll read is the title poem, which is called I Carry My Mother, and it is a rhyming pantoum. I can't help myself. I'll give your listeners a little poetry lesson. A pantoum, as you'll see, has whole lines repeated in a certain pattern. So each line in the poem is used twice. And they don't have to rhyme, but this one does. I carry my mother. I carry my mother wherever I go, her belly, her thighs, her plentiful hips, her milky white skin she called this side of snow, the crease of her brow and the plump of her lips. Her belly, her thighs, her plentiful hips, the curl of her hair and her sharp widow's peak, the crease of her brow and the plump of her lips, the hook of her nose and the curve of her cheek. The curl of her hair and her sharp widow's peak, the dark beauty mark to the left of her chin, the hook of her nose and the curve of her cheek, her delicate wrist so impossibly thin, the dark beauty mark to the left of her cheek, her deep-set brown eyes that at times appeared black, her delicate wrist so impossibly thin. I stare at the mirror. My mother stares back. Her deep-set brown eyes that at times appeared black, her milky white skin she called this side of snow. I stare at the mirror. My mother stares back. I carry my mother wherever I go.
So beautiful.
Thank you, Mel.
Wow. Wow. Now we're going to go back a couple of decades. We
Okay.
lunged forward and backwards. So I'm interested in how Heather Has Two Mummies happened, how you segued from poetry into children's books.
So Heather was a happy accident. What happened was, before I wrote Heather, I had written the short story collection, A Letter to Harvey Milk, and a novel called Good Enough to Eat, and a few poetry books. And so I was known as a writer in my community. And a woman named Clover stopped me on the street and she said, Lynn and I, Lynn being her spouse, have no children's book that we could read. Amy being her daughter, that shows a family like ours. Somebody should write one. So, she just kind of looked at me, and it wasn't really a suggestion or a question. It was, I want you to do this.
Do that.
Do this. Right. And that request resonated with me because when I was growing up, there really were no picture books that showed Jewish families. I never read a picture book that showed a little girl with curly hair sitting with her bubby, lighting Shabbos candles or eating matzo ball soup or doing any of the things that my family did. And, I grew up reading Dick and Jane. I grew up knowing, of course, about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. And I'm sure it pained my parents because I would ask them, why can't you take me to sit on Santa Claus's lap? Why can't I look for Easter bunnies? And my parents are very clear that, those are not our traditions, which of course made me mad when I was a kid. But now I'm very grateful for because my parents really instilled in me a sense of identity and Jewish pride. Um, so, and what was interesting to me is that even though I lived in a very Jewish neighborhood in Brighton Beach, and most of my parents' friends were Jewish friends, most of my parents' friends were children of immigrants, like they were, but still, my direct lived experience kind of took a back seat to books and movies and TV where I was not represented. So when this request was asked of me, I just thought, I can't say no. I have to try this. And then I had the kind of naive notion, oh, children's books, there aren't that many words. How hard can this be? And of course, now I know that for me, actually, writing picture books is one of the most difficult forms because it has to do everything a longer work does, but it has to be succinct, where you don't get that many words. And there are many other things to think about. So I like to quote Mark Twain, who an editor, purportedly, I read this, an editor asked him to write something that was 3 pages long. And he wrote back, this was like a telegram, need 100 pages, give me 3 days. Need 3 pages, give me 100 days. So, and I was so lucky because I got the chance to revise Heather like 25 years after it came out, because when I wrote the book, I sent it to many publishers, large, small, mainstream, feminists. Nobody wanted to touch it. So a friend and I,
those were the days of the self-addressed, the stamped envelopes and the real slush piles.
absolutely, absolutely.
No
So
agents. You
no,
worked in a
no,
wilderness.
I did work in a
So
wilderness.
you sent it to multitude of agents, of publishers. They rejected it. You were rejected.
I would say rather that I was declined.
Okay. All right.
I was offering something that was
Yeah.
declined.
Mhm.
So then another friend of mine, her name was Sivia Gover, and she was at the time a lesbian mom of a 1-year-old. And, we look back and neither of us can remember, but one of us said, well, let's just do it. We're both strong Jewish women, and when you want things done, you do it yourself. Whereas my grandmother used to say, just because they said no to me, you think I'm finished. So we decided to learn how to publish a children's book. And Sivia at the time had a desktop publishing business. Remember those? Called In Other Words Publishing, where she published like pamphlets and things like that. So there at the time were a lot of feminist publishers. So we used them. We asked them, how do you get an ISBN number? Who prints your books? And then through the lesbian grapevine, we found an illustrator. And then the book came out in December of 1989. And then about 6 months later, Sasha Allison, who at the time had a publishing company called Allison Publications, came upon the book in a bookstore called New Words, which is a feminist bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he had published Daddy's Roommate. So he said, who are you? What are you doing? Maybe we should join forces. And Sivia, who is also a wonderful writer, a poet as well, we said, we would love for you to take over because we're not really publishers. We're not really interested in being publishers. So he took the book over, and then it went on and had the life that it continues to enjoy to this day.
Okay, so it's is this the book that kind of made Lesléa Newman?
I suppose some would say so. It's interesting though, because some people were kind of I don't think horrified is the right word I'd use, but they cautioned me. They were like, do you think you should use your real name? Maybe you should use a pseudonym. Maybe this is too controversial. And I was like, I haven't done all this work to give somebody else the credit, even a made up person. No, I'm using my name and let the chips fall where they may. And as far as I know, no one has ever hesitated to publish me because I'm the author of Heather.
Okay, but the book has been controversial.
Some people find it controversial, so I always like to remind people that I did not write a controversial book. I wrote a book that some people consider controversial.
Exactly. And you went on. Oy vey, I'm forgetting my English. Um, too many years in Israel. You've gone on to have this remarkable career as a children's writer.
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky and grateful.
Yes. The only thing that interesting, you didn't want to change your name, you said a few minutes ago, but you did change your name because you were born
Yes,
Leslie, not Lesléa. So a few
yes.
words about that because you did change your name once that I know of.
I did change my name. Well, actually, I changed my name twice. So I
Well,
will
I
tell
know
you
I
both.
only know of once. Go ahead.
I'll tell you both those stories. So when I was in high school, I was put in the boys' gym class because of my name, Leslie, which can be a male or female name. And at that point, gender neutral names were not popular like they are today. And so I was teased mercilessly because the boys all, at that time, boys and girls took gym separately. And so, they called my name, unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't in the boys' gym class, but the boys all teased me, and so that was horrifying as somebody who had enough issues and, wanted to fit in. So I decided to change my name, and I thought about my Hebrew name, which is Leah, going by Leah. But I also, at a very young age, knew I wanted to be a published author and I wanted my name to stand out. So I decided to combine Leslie and Leah and make it Lesléa. And my dad's an attorney. And I asked him if he would help me change my name legally. And I'm just amazed that he said yes at that point in time. And so, but he said nobody works for free. So he said he had to charge me. So I said, okay, what is your fee? And he said a nickel. So I gave him a nickel. He put it in his shirt pocket and he said, you have now retained me as an attorney for life. And so that was a very well spent nickel. So that was the first time I changed my name. The second time I changed my name was when I got legally married to my beloved spouse, whose name is Mary Vasquez. And so the time we got married legally was 2004, which was Massachusetts was the first state that passed marriage equality. And so we knew that there were other states, actually all of the other states, that would not consider us legally married. And because we were older, neither of us wanted to change our last names. So I took Mary's last name as my middle name, and she took my last name as her middle name. So it does confuse people. There's no hyphen. So my name really is Lesléa Newman, Vasquez being my middle name, which I don't use professionally. But it is my legal name, and we had to go through all kinds of. It's interesting. We also learned that if you get married and you change your last name, at least in Massachusetts, you don't have to do anything. But if you change your middle name or add a name, you have to like pay this big fee, and you have to put a legal notice in the newspaper, and you have to do all kinds of things, which we did.
We would say in Yiddish, gehackte Zores.
Yeah, or beschleppte Krank.
Exactly. So, you like other authors, carry around several pieces of baggage in your life, being different in several ways, being special in several ways, trying to fit in, and at the same time, I don't know what the word is, raging against fitting in.
So I would say instead of baggage, I would substitute the word blessings. So I feel very blessed to be a Jew. I feel very blessed to be part of the LGBTQ community. I feel very blessed now to be a certain age. I feel very blessed to be a feminist. So, these are things I feel very strongly about, and feel obligated, and it's a joyous obligation and responsibility to use these perspectives to create literature that hopefully will change the world in a positive way.
Okay, so today we call them blessings perhaps as adults, but when we were kids, I remember being left hand, being Jewish, being forced to write with my right hand, being forced to pray to Jesus in kindergarten. This was a baggage. I mean, perhaps I could call it as an adult a blessing because it made me who I am. But aren't we sort of rewriting our histories when we do that?
Well, first, Mel, I'm curious, where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up in Canada, but this is about you, dear.
Okay, well, just because my spouse also has a memory of, she's not left-handed, but somebody else when she was growing up, she's older than I am, being forced to write with their right hand, which is just this happened in Catholic school. So, I guess the left hand was considered the hand of the devil or something kind of crazy like that. But so when I was growing up, I was teased a lot for being fat, for having frizzy hair. Those were the two main things. My school, there were a lot of Jewish students, so that wasn't a huge issue until I went to the University of Vermont, and I was the first Jew that many people had met, and they asked me, ridiculous questions about horns and just all kinds of things. But I do think, even though at the time as a child is very painful, it for me, I'll speak for myself, it made me stronger to just learn how to stand up for myself and be who I am and be proud, and also to learn to stick up for other people, right? And to not be a bystander, to be an upstart.
Okay, but you also had gender issues with society, with your family, perhaps. These are real struggles.
Well, I didn't come out actually as a lesbian until I was 27. So I didn't know that that's who I truly am and deep inside, because I had no role models. I didn't even, know that was any kind of possibility. I just knew that I felt differently and that I would probably be alone and miserable in my entire life. That's kind of was the narrative. That's how I felt. So then I went off to college, and then of course I went to Europa. I met Alan, and even then I was like, okay, there were gay men, but it really took me a long time until I met any lesbians and realized that that was a possibility.
Incredible, incredible. So now that you have this wonderful career and amazing books coming out with leading publishers, and you are represented, you do have an agent.
I do.
Let's mention her.
My wonderful agent is Elizabeth Harding from Curtis Brown. I've been with her for 25 years.
Was it difficult to find an agent? Did you have to look, or did agents look for you at that
No,
juncture in your
I
career?
had to look, but by the time I got an agent, I had published several books unagented. And I also was in, at the time, a wonderful writers group with Jane Yolen, who I've already mentioned, Patricia McLaughlin, who wrote Sarah Plain and Tall, and who is unfortunately no longer with us. She was my best friend. So I miss her dearly. Ann Turner, Barbara Diamond Golden, who's also a wonderful children's book writer. Who else is in that group? Corinne Damus, Anna Kerwin, who also is no longer with us, Ann Turner. I hope I'm not leaving anyone out. Oh, Ellen Whitlinger, who also has died. She wrote a lot of wonderful young adult novels. So, you know, being an author, and I really distinguish being a writer from being an author, right? Being a writer is the writing and the creativity, and being an author is the business aspect. And it truly is a business like any other business. So networking is really important. And also being kind is important. So it's not just all about me, what can I get from this person? You know, how can people help me? But, you know, how can I also be of service to others? How can I support other writers, especially writers who are just beginning?
So, but you didn't answer how you found Elizabeth Harding and she found you.
So I wrote to several agents upon the recommendation of some more established writers, and interviewed a few people. And then I actually had another agent at Curtis Brown for a while who's no longer there. And so then I moved on to being represented by Elizabeth.
So it's time to start to say goodbye.
Already? That was so quick.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's been wonderful. Anything I didn't ask you?
Oh, let's see. I really can't think of anything. I mean, of course, I'm happy to mention some of my other books if you're interested.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so a book that came out last year that I also really love is called The Babka Sisters. And it's really fun to read aloud because there's Esther and Hester and their pets, their sisters, and Chester and Lester and their neighbor Sylvester. And it's just a really fun book, not really in rhyme, but a lot of wordplay. So I love that book. And then there is Quetzal the Cat Who Composed, which is a true story about a cat that actually composes a 30-second piano piece that wins an award. And then what else can I tell you?
A concerto.
Okay, exactly, a concerto, not a catastrophe. And then I'll just mention two books of mine that are very serious. I hope this doesn't fall on my head. Okay. So this is a book called October Morning, a Song for Matthew Shepard, which if people don't know, this is a teen novel in verse, which is about Matthew Shepard, who was kidnapped from a bar in Wyoming. He was a college student, and he was taken to the outskirts of town and tied to a fence and beaten and ultimately murdered. So this is 68 poems that explore that hate crime from all kinds of points of view, including the fence has a voice, the deer who kept him company through the night has a voice, many voices. And so that came out in 2012. And then this is a follow-up book called Always Matt, a tribute to Matthew Shepard, which is more about his life than his death. And Howard Reeves is also the editor of this book. And it's just very beautifully illustrated. So there, for example, is a beautiful illustration of the prairie in Wyoming. And so those are books that are particularly close to my heart. So I just wanted to mention them. Also because they're both poems.
Listen, I'm going to tell everybody that's listening that your two new books are wonderful. They should run out and buy them. And I can't wait to meet you live in August, and we'll share some thoughts about this interview. It's been wonderful to have you. And we are here with Lesléa Newman, celebrating two new books that came out within a month of each other, Like
Yes.
Father, Like Son. That's Abrams, and Joyful Song, A Naming Story, Levine Carrido. And wow, I can't wait to meet you and to see what else you have in the near future. And hopefully we'll have another interview next year. Emir
Okay.
Hashem. Emir Hashem, as the Jews say.
Mm-hmm. Alavai.
Halavai. So, Lesléa, thank you so much. Ah, and I forgot, I got so excited. I forgot to say who I am. I'm Mel Rosenberg, and I am the host of the Children's Literature channel of the New Books Network. And thank you so much to our wonderful guest.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.